Senior Vice President and Chief Content Officer for Black Enterprise. Welcome to our debut episode of Boardroom Chats, hosted by Nationwide. I'm so excited to present this new podcast series to you, our audience. Each episode, we will talk with board members of major corporations who will share how their deliberations and decisions affect the financial health of companies as well as shareholder value. Moreover, we will review how their actions directly impact you, whether you're an employee, manager, consumer, business owner, or investor. To kick off our series, my first guest is a game-changing corporate leader who drives inclusion, innovation, and excellence at one of the nation's largest companies. Gale V. King, Executive Vice President, Chief Administrative Officer for Nationwide, a Fortune 100 financial services company with about 27,000 associates. In this role, the 30-year veteran is responsible for providing leadership for its human resources, diversity and inclusion, corporate real estate, corporate security, and aviation operations. Under her stewardship, Nationwide has been recognized for its leading HR practices and as an employer of choice for its strong culture, performance orientation, engaging work environment, and commitment to D&I. As such, Nationwide has been listed among Black Enterprise's best companies for diversity. In terms of corporate governance, Gale serves as an independent director for JB Hunt and Autozone. And due to such achievements, Black Enterprise has honored Gale with the 2020 Women of Power Legacy Award and named her one of our 50 most impactful women in business over the last 50 years. Gale, thank you for being our first guest for the debut episode of Boardroom Chats.
Wonderful.
I'm looking really forward to this conversation.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Yeah. Well, the first question, because this is the first episode, is why is it important that our audience knows what happens in the boardroom? Why are those deliberations important to the audience that is most oftentimes oblivious to boardroom interactions and what happens with corporate directors?
Yeah. Again, it depends on the audience. I mean, there are some people who are interested in ascending and taking on roles in the boardroom. And then I think for anyone who is an employee at corporate America, that they need to have a sense of the important discussions that's going on, especially as it relates to talent and culture and diversity. So again, the more knowledge you have about how decisions are made, the more you will be prepared to understand how to be impactful in whatever arena you're in. So again, I think knowledge is power, and the more information you have, the more it will help you decide, how you can navigate within your respective areas.
So why was it important for you to be a member of a corporate board? And share with us the process of you becoming a member of the boards of both AutoZone and JB Hunt.
Yeah.
Was that your decision or did they come to you? How did that process, how was that process?
Yeah.
How did you engage in that process?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's natural for leaders who have held, senior level roles in organizations to look around at some point in their career journey to say, what else can I do? How else can I add impact? And it's back to your initial question where you asked, what goes on in the boardroom? Well, I've been a senior executive for many, many years. So I understand the important role board members make in, strategic decisions, but also in that talent and culture. And, for me, how then do you continue to add value? And being a corporate director is the highest level of governance that you can provide any organization. So at some point in my career, I was like, okay, I have proven that I know how to be a great executive. I know how to get things done. And that, what's the next move for me? What else do I want to do in order to continue to contribute? And I made a decision, and I had many people say, Gale, because of your experience with talent and culture and D&I, that you would be good for a board. And, so what you do then is, you do an assessment of whether or not you really have something to offer. I felt I had something to offer, and you leverage your networks. And I was so very fortunate to have individuals who have been very supportive of me and advocating on my behalf. It's a relationship game. You have to have the skills, but you have to have someone who is on a board. I had someone on AutoZone, someone also on JB Hunt, who could at least bring your name to the forefront and advocate for you.
So in terms of looking at those two boards, AutoZone and JB Hunt, why were those boards important for you to join? Why was it important for you to join those boards? Is it, was it what they represented? Was it the industries that they were in? What were the factors that drove that decision?
That's a really great question, because a lot of people are looking for boards and they're trying to figure out, well, where do they add value? So again, I think for me, and as I was making my decision, it was about really what was the mission and purpose of the organization. Could I get around that? Did I feel that they were committed to what I valued? And did I feel as though were they serious about having someone added to the board who had a point of view? So again, sometimes people get caught up and say, I only want to be on a board that provides me an opportunity to do something around, retail or manufacturing or whatever. For me, it's all about, what does the company stand for? Are they committed to people? Are they committed? Do they have a purpose? They're committed to their communities. And most of all, the team, the people that I'm going to be interacting with, will they be people that I want to be around? I'm at a wonderful point in my career, and I think most people are at this stage where you're doing things in which you feel that you can add value and that you want to do. So again, I think you start with mission and purpose. You start with, will they value you? You start with whether or not you believe that it will be a place in which your voice can be heard.
So today we're looking at an environment where we have a number of corporations that have made pledges to racial equity. From your vantage point, is that starting to translate more in terms of board recruitment?
Yeah.
And, and what's the value of having an African-American or diversity on a board?
Yeah, well, I think, and we've said this for years, but all of the research from all of the experts clearly show the value of diversity. But at the end of the day, every corporation is trying to grow their business, and they're trying to, and growth is colorblind. But if in fact you're trying to grow your business and ensure that your customers feel valued, then you absolutely have to have people in your organization and on your boards who represent diversity of thinking. That's why sometimes a board is looking for people only with finance experience or only with marketing experience. You need diversity of not only thinking, but of demographics. You need diversity, because at the end of the day, we all bring a different lens to the table. And if everyone has the same lens, there's no way you're going to be able to innovate and create for the future. So diversity is, it's the same reason diversity is so important in corporate America. And we have seen examples, and I won't call out those corporations, but those corporations who create brands that they are trying to attract a certain community, and the people who developed the advertising did not consider the fact that they didn't have a lens of those experiences. So again, we know the data, but at the end of the day, it's really about whether or not those CEOs are intentional about making it happen, and the board is intentional about making it happen. And I think it's a great time.
Yeah, well, I talked to one board member. I asked them the same question, and they said, well, they need me on the board to keep them out of trouble, because, as you talked about, advertising campaigns, branding, policies. Those could be, huge, not
People.
only embarrassments, but they can really hit the top and bottom line if they don't have the circle of diversity to help, talk about these issues, to talk
Yeah.
about how they position themselves.
Not only positioning themselves to their customer, which is at the end of the day extremely important, but it's also about positioning themselves to attract and retain talent. Because it's a talent game. The success of any organization is dependent upon their talent. And if you have a skill that's valuable and you are working at a company and you don't see yourself and you don't feel that they're committed to what's important to you, then you take your skills someplace else. And so again, I mean, there is the research has proven that companies who, and I mean, from any of the experts, the McKinseys, all of them, clearly have shown the correlation between diversity and business results and innovation. So again, to me, it makes sense. And, I'm proud that at the company I work on at Nationwide, we understand it. We've leaned into it, and we've seen the positive results, not only in terms of our company results, but how our employees feel about working at our company.
But for every Nationwide, there are other companies that just don't, just don't get that, or they just don't see it as part of their either cultural or business mandate. For example, the recent Harvard Business Review study showed that 0.2 candidates, 0.2% of candidates that are considered for boards are either ethnic minorities. 0.2%, it's not even 1%. So it's what can African-American board members or African-American senior managers do to change that equation?
I think you have to have the courage to ask for what you want. And I think you have to have the courage to walk away when something isn't working for you. But I think if you're on a board, I speak to Butch at, who was on AutoZone. He's very courageous with his voice about, ensuring diversity. He knows the business, but he also understands the power of talent and culture. I think that every African American who is on a board should see it as their responsibility and accountability when they're in the room to say, we need to do better, and be unapologetic about that. So we have a role to play to say we need to do more, and not ignore it. And then, businesses, when you work in a company, I love associates who come to me and say, Gale, Nationwide can do better in this space. Because what they're saying is, I'm invested in you, and what I see, I don't like. And if we value them, we will do what we need to do. So I think more people need to speak up and speak out, and hold our board and the senior leadership team to making the change. They can't make the change overnight, but they need to be able to show them that they have a plan and they have a journey. And I think that most corporations, if you ask them and if you hold them to it, I think they'll lean into it. And I do think that this is a time that more and more of them are understanding that they've got to put more and more focus on it. It's never from a place of not doing it. I think from time to time, it just hasn't been the highest priority.
So that interaction is the obligation not only of the board member, but it's also at all levels within the corporation.
But again, I tell people, I believe that asking for what you want, or expressing a concern in a constructive way, is a really positive way to make change. And again, if you are managing and requesting something in a really constructive way, and that organization isn't able to hear you, and then that's not where you want to be. At some point, you have to say, it's like what I said to you earlier about, so many people want to be on boards, but you want to be on a board that values what you value. You want to be on a board in which, you feel that the time you're investing in them that they are totally committed to the things that's important to you. So I do believe that people should ask, but they should do it in a way that says, I see you and I think we're better than this, and that together we can create something really great.
Well, letting our audience know that, just so that they didn't know, the board is the CEO's boss.
It is.
The board evaluates the CEO
It does.
and evaluates the CEO on all measures, in terms of meeting the company's mandate to increase shareholder value, but also to maintain a culture that produces innovation, greater results, that's forward-looking. And all of that, as you said, includes diversity and having diversity at all levels. That's an important measure for the yardstick for the CEO to hit in terms of the board reviewing his or her performance.
Yeah. And if you're on a board, you should make sure that that it's someplace you can be proud of. It's back to my point. You want to work for a company you can be proud of. If you're going to be on a board, if that board is not committed to the things that you can say I'm proud of, that's not a board for you either.
Well, one of the big issues that we're looking at right now is diversity in the C-suite. Looking at CEOs that are positioned, and right now, if you look at the Fortune 500, there are now 5 African-American CEOs.
And congratulations to our newest African-American CEO, the amazing Roz. We're really excited for her.
We're extremely excited that development happened. I don't want to pour cold water on it, but come March, that 5 goes to 4 when Roger Ferguson of TIAA retires.
Right.
So, what can be done to change the numbers, the percentages of African Americans who are CEOs of publicly traded companies? A couple of years ago, Ken Chenault said where we are was embarrassing, but there hasn't been a change in that, in that development. And we know at the board level, CEO succession is a part of, your responsibility. And and having diversity in terms of, the leadership of the corporation, that falls on your plate. So what needs to happen to ensure that we have more African Americans?
Well, I think a lot of what is happening, I think that there are more and more African Americans on boards. And the more you increase the diversity of boards, then the more you'll begin to see that those board members will be asking, when you're putting together a succession planning for a CEO, they want to see diversity. What we're saying is that, we don't want you to put someone in a job that shouldn't be in a job, but we want to make sure that you're developing the talent pool so that you have people for those jobs. So again, I think, and then I think that the CEOs have an accountability to ensure that they have that they're developing general managers for those C-suite levels. So again, I think it starts with the board, but I also think the CEOs play a critical role in having a pipeline of talent that can compete for the CEO role, because it is really about the experiences that you're building as you go. And sometimes, I think a lot of people they stall at a certain level, and the CEO has to be deliberate about that. One of the things, and you've heard me in prior interviews talk about being very intentional. You have to be very intentional about ensuring that you have diversity, that you have diverse candidates. Just like I always, when people ask me about it, I was like, when we decide to grow, or when we decide to divest, or when we decide to acquire, we're very intentional about that. And we should have to be very intentional about ensuring that we have the diversity we need for the future. So again, I'm always the optimist. And I do believe that, I believe people are keeping it front and center. I certainly believe the proxy advisors, I think, all of those stakeholder. I think all of the shareholders are all asking more and more questions about ESG, asking about D&I. And so the more you have people who are asking questions about these things, the more it holds boards as well as CEOs and senior managers accountable for change.
Well, Gail, you know this probably better than a host of corporate leaders out there, having been, continuing your role as executive vice president and chief administrative officer at Nationwide. You know about talent development, you know how to create a pipeline.
Yeah.
How do you guide CEOs and senior managers to create that C-suite pipeline? Where do you start? Do you start at the beginning of an associate's career? Do you look at them as they rise to middle management? How would you guide in a boardroom someone to a CEO to ensure that they have a healthy pipeline of diverse
Yeah.
candidates?
So one of the things I would say is start with the board. And I'm really proud that at Nationwide, our board of directors require that the CEO brings his senior team in quarterly, different senior leaders to come in and give an update on the talent of their organization. Because oftentimes you want to leave it to HR to come in and give an update on that. Well, I'm fine helping you, but you're the one that needs to drive it. And so, our business units have to come in and they have to show that they have succession, that they have candidates ready to replace them. And there's a requirement that it be diverse. It can't just be, this one person or two people. So again, I think the board can start with an expectation, because the one thing about the board is that when the board is asking questions, everyone's listening. And they're willing to respond. And the CEO, certainly, as you mentioned earlier, reports to the board, but they too can ask the same thing. So the reality is that if you're trying to develop leaders for the future, it starts when they enter corporate America in their first professional role. Oftentimes people get stuck in the mid-manager role. So you have to have processes and systems in place to understand what happened to all of those rising entry-level professional people and why did they get stuck in mid-management. And so you have to have a robust talent planning strategy in which you can begin to see what is your retention, what is your attrition, what's happening to people, where do they stall out, and then put things in place. Years ago, we were looking and we saw, and it's not an issue now, where we saw that women, they were having tremendous success up until a certain grade. And then what we said is what was getting in the way of that. And again, it's about data. The more data you have, the more you can then, it can inform your decisions and inform the question. So why is it that, John and Gale started at the same time, had all of the same experiences, but when it came time to get to a president's role, we couldn't get Gale there. What was happening? And a lot of times what we found, it was sponsorship, our mentorship. And so what we did is we created sponsorship opportunities for managers early on. So again, I think you have to do the assessment, you have to get the data, you have to see where there's a problem, and then you have to be committed to putting plans in place to address it. It's like anything. You got to have the data, but you've got to want to do it. You've got to want to do it. If you don't want to do it, then nothing happens if you don't want to do it.
Well, it goes back to what you say about being intentional.
Yes.
We do our annual survey of where corporations are on the S&P 500 in terms of, African Americans on boards. And we're still in the area of 37% of companies on the S&P 500 have no African Americans on board. But in our last, survey, we found that 100% of the S&P have women. And those are white women, just given, largely white women given, the percentages. So why has that become intentional? And in fact, there's legislation in California There's legislation in other states, state treasurers, as well as comptrollers, make it a part of their guidelines in terms of investing in pension funds of corporations. Why hasn't there been that level of intentionality
Yeah.
with African-American candidates?
Yeah. Again, I think there was a major focus to do women, and you can see that there's been improvement. It still, I mean, it still isn't where it needs to be, but I think that minorities, like I said earlier, the minorities who are on boards need to bring a minority on the board with them. So we've got to lift. I believe that women, have done a really great job of lifting other women. I think minorities need to we need to also do the same to lift other minorities.
Yeah, our late founder, Earl Graves Sr., often told me how he got on the Chrysler board years ago. John Johnson was on the board. When he retired from the board, he said, I want Earl to replace me. He was that deliberate. And it happened. He had that level of respect, that level of authority. And obviously, Mr. Graves had the credential and could bring some value to the board. And it happened because it was just that level of being proactive and intentional to make
We
it.
have to, I mean, again, we have to also, say this is important. We have to be, one of the things I ask people all the time, in the role I have, I have a responsibility to the entire organization, and I'm totally committed to that. I'm also totally committed to ensuring that Nationwide looks like the communities we work and serve. And I'm fortunate that I have a board and a CEO that understands that and does that as well. But I think that every African American, every Hispanic American, every woman should also be looking to saying, what am I doing? What else can I do to help improve this? Who have I recruited? Who have I referred? So again, I think some of that with women, I think they've done a really good job of bringing on other women. I think we've done it. I think that there's more we can do.
Yeah, and also another case for board diversity is that there are occasions where the CEO is taken from the board to run the company as a leader of the company. When we look at the S&P 500, a perfect example is Arnold Donald of Carnival Corp. He was on the board. They had a CEO search, and they decided that Arnold was the best person positioned to lead the company. The same thing happened with Lisa Wardell, who was on the board of DeVry, which is now called Adtalem Education, and she became CEO because they found as a board member and what the value she brought as a board member translated also into leadership of the corporation and moving the corporation forward.
I mean, again, you get to have you want to be in the room where the conversations are happening, and you want to be able to be impactful. And we're always being watched no matter where we are at. And so you never know when people are like, oh, those skills are better served not on the board, but perhaps in an operational role. So a good point.
Well, I want to shift the conversation a bit because, you deal with a vast array of, corporate challenges and corporate initiatives. Share with us what went on in some of the boardrooms, if you can. I know there's a level of fiduciary responsibility that you have on the board that you cannot, share openly with our audience, but give us a feel, if you will, how a board attacks a problem like the COVID-19 pandemic. How do you go about that process in terms of, securing the company, making sure it moves forward as a business, but also protecting the employees and other stakeholders within the corporation?
I mean, again, you have to, one of the things that's important for, I think, everyone to understand is that the board is not management. And, the board has a CEO and a senior management team, and in many cases, thousands of associates. The board's accountability is to ensure that the CEO is paying attention to all of the things that needed to be paid attention to, and is bringing them updates that says that, they've identified the risk, they've mitigated the risk, this is how we're handling it. So again, it's really about, the job of the board primarily is to ensure that it's getting done, not to do it. The CEO is certainly coming in and providing us with updates on what is happening. And, depending on which role you're in on the board, I mean, some are more focused on some of the audits, others are on what's happening with the people, but we're all looking at it holistically from our lens to ensure that, the culture is able to sustain, the customer needs are being met. But again, you rely on your CEO. That's one of the big things that I learned at Nationwide. I am in my role as the chief administrative officer. I have HR, and so I am the board liaison to the HR committee. Very early on, you understand there's a big difference. Oftentimes many people want to come in, they still want to do their job that they had. That's not your job. Your job is to ensure that the work is being done and you're asking the right questions.
Well, I'm glad you made that distinction as we clarify the responsibility of the board to the corporation and its relationship with the CEO. The board is not management. The board's job, if you will, is oversight and guidance and advice, yes, and strategic advice.
And the strategic.
Yeah, yeah, and which of course you are perfectly positioned to be engaged in, given your history. Had another question that went to a comment that you made in terms of shareholders being more vocal, being more active. And as we look at different issues in the corporation, whether it's diversity, whether it's this corporation stance on the environment,
yes,
what are you looking at in terms of what stakeholders and shareholders are asking for today? How, I know that changes from company to company, but is there a common themes that you see in terms of the boards that you serve on?
I mean, again, I think, we all live in America, we're all trying to grow our businesses. We're all trying to ensure that we're in compliance with whatever the laws are, the regulations are for our state. So I think every corporation is looking at all of the environmental, social governance issues. I think the investors are looking at it. I think the shareholders are looking, the proxy advisors are looking at it. Diversity and inclusion. I mean, you would almost be tone deaf not to be paying attention to the things that's important, to all of these key stakeholders. So I don't see a difference. I mean, they may look at it through a different filter. They like, climate control or the environment is different depending on what type of business you're in and how you're contributing to that. But they all have that as an agenda item. And, from a good governance perspective, any board member, any board is going to be asking management, what are they doing? What are you doing to ensure, that, that we're honoring and living into the things that we should be doing in that space. Yeah. I haven't seen a difference. I see the same topics. Succession is always top of mind. But certainly talent is always top of mind. DE&I, the environment is taking on a bigger role. It's purpose. Shareholders are, all about purpose and, growth, profit, and purpose.
Which goes first, profit or purpose?
I think that you can do both.
Okay.
You can do both.
Yeah, I think in terms of what we get back from our audience in general is that more people, whether they're employees, whether they're shareholders, whether they're suppliers, are looking for corporate leadership. They're looking for corporations to lead not only their corporations, but to play a larger role in leading this nation. We're just at a time where the country is looking for that. I know we have a new administration, but they're looking to ensure that we don't go, that vacuum doesn't go unfilled. Yeah. And they believe that corporations can play a larger role.
I mean, corporations play a huge role. And, and that's why when I said earlier, is that but we all have to be, no matter where we are in our companies, we all have to be willing to have our voices heard. And we have to be willing to hold people accountable for being their best selves. And you don't have to beat them up to do it. But, if you are sitting down and you've worked at a company and that company values you, and you say, you know what, I love this company, but you all are not you're not leaning into this. I think that only a place you would not want to be would not be responsive to that.
I have one other question. So you talk about, leaning into challenges. Um, I'm an employee. I may be a new employee. I may be a middle manager or what have you. And I want to lean into problems as a board member, like, like Gale King. How do I get on that path to becoming a corporate board member? Or where should I start? What advice would you give someone about becoming or getting on either a corporate board or starting that process?
Well, it depends on where they are in their career. I mean, people have to understand that boards are not a place for you to develop. It's a place where you come prepared to contribute. So I think sometimes, that's the difference. It is not a developmental assignment for you. I mean, the board members are responsible to and accountable to the shareholders. So you have to come giving something to that board. So you have to sort of know where you are on your journey. I mean, if you're starting out your career in a company and you've been in the company for a few years, I would really encourage you to get involved with things that the company values. Nationwide is huge on, and in fact, the other, both JB Hunt and AutoZone are very huge in supporting the communities. So if that's important to the company, then you should say, how can I get involved with the things that that company values? How do you get on not-for-profit boards, depending on where you are in your journey? And how do you get on special projects? I mean, again, you have to build a portfolio and you build it based on the level you're at. If you are at a certain level in an organization, you can't be the CEO. Likewise, you can't expect to go and run a board. So you have to ensure that you have made it to the level where the experiences you're bringing will add value to that board. But that does not mean that there are not other things that you can do that you can begin to build those skills. Like I've served on a number of not-for-profit boards. I've been very active in my church. I've been involved with a number of different, professional organizations. All of those things help you build the skills that you need in order to help you prepare for the time when all of your experiences come together, that you then can add value to a board that has an accountability to its shareholders.
So much about being on a board is having the board members look to you and the CEO look to you for judgment. And that comes with seasoning, that comes with experience. And that's something that prospective board members should realize, especially given where the place they are in their career or their aspiration to be on a board.
Right. Again, as you're pursuing a board, I really tell people to remember that it is not a developmental opportunity for you. It really is about an opportunity for you to add value. And you need to ensure that you have the experiences and that will enable you to add value when you take on that role. It is a major responsibility. I mean, it's certainly an honor, but you want to be able to come to the table able to make a difference.
Well, Gail, this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. This is the perfect conversation for the inaugural episode of Boardroom Chat.
Well, again, I appreciate the opportunity always to speak with, you, Derek, and Black Enterprise. So I appreciate talking about it. I am loving board work. And again, my main message to people is to just, get in the way of whatever it is you want, do the work and let people know that you're interested in a board. Go for it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thank you.